For the purpose of this tutorial, I'll be making use of pencil, marker, tape measure, paper, scissors, French curve, and ruler. The first thing to do is to rule a straight line which will serve as the starting point and the shoulder line. From the shoulder line, I'll take all my vertical measurements, my bust point which is 9.5 inches, and then my under bust which is 12.5, and then my waistline which is 16 inches plus 1 inch M allowance. I will mark the same measurements on the other side and use ruler to connect the dots together. I'm trying to draft out an upper basic bodice before drafting out the corset pattern. I will take the neck measurement now, which is not necessary for the corset pattern, but because we are trying to draft out an upper basic bodice first. The width is 3 inches and the depth is 3.5 inches. I will use my French curve to connect the dots. Afterwards, I'll take my shoulder measurement, which is 15 inches divided by 2, that's 7.5. Then I'll come down by ½ inch for the shoulder slope. You can decide to come down by 1 inch. Then I'll take my armhole measurement. To get this, you divide your bust measurement by 6, then you add 1.5 inches. My armhole is 7.5. Then I'll connect the dots together and then rule a straight line across. Afterwards, I'll label all this line. This is the chest line, the bust point, the under bust line, and the last one is the waist line. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to get my armhole curve. I'll do this by first dividing my bust measurement by 4, which is 9 inches. I'll make a point. Then I'll come to the armhole line, measure it and divide whatever I have there by 2, and then I'll mark it and then go in by ½ inch. Then I'll use the French curve to connect the dots together. The next thing to do now is to take the dart. So I'll come to the bust point here and then measure my bust band, that is my nipple to nipple measurement. My nipple to nipple measurement is 7 divided by 2, I have 3.5. I'll measure the same thing at the under bust line and also at the waistline, and then I'll connect the dots together. Then I'll come to the bust point line and come down by 1 inch. Go to my waistline and measure ½ inch on both sides of the line. Then I'll connect the dots to form that. The next thing to do is to divide the shoulder line into 2. Measure the shoulder line, whatever you have there, divide it into 2, then mark it and then connect the dots to the bust point line. The next thing to do here is to measure the distance between the bust point and the under bust line. Here I have 3 inches. Whatever you have there, it could be 3.5, it could be 4 inches. Just measure each round to form radius for the bust. If you have a compass, you can go ahead to use it. So I'll make sure that the tip of my tape does not leave the bust point line, so I'll measure it round. Now I'm trying to connect the dots together to make the circle more visible. Alright guys, so I'll come to the under bust and measure 1/4 inch on either sides of the dart, and then I'm just going to connect the dots to the waistline, as you can see me do. Afterwards, I'll use my French curve to connect the dots here to where the dart started from, that is the 1 inch we came down with earlier, and now we connect it at the other side as well. Now I'll come to the top of the radius like this, and then I'll go back to my under bust and measure whatsoever I have there. I have 2 inches there. I'll measure the same thing So I'll just divide that 2 inches into 2, that is 1 inch on either sides of this line. I will use my curved ruler to connect the dots to the bust line, as you can see. Afterwards, I'll come to the center front on the chest line and go down by ½ inch. You can decide to go up by ½ inch or 1 inch, or leave this at the chest line, but I choose to come down by ½ inch, and then I'll go in by ½ inch as well. Then I'll draw a straight line to connect the 2 points together. Now I'll connect from the ½ inch line to the top of my radius using my curved ruler like this. I will also connect from the ½ inch back to the under bust line like this. Now I'll come to the side front at the chest line and measure the distance between the armhole line and the armhole curve. I'll measure the distance. So whatever I have there, I'll divide it into 2, and then I'll make a mark like this, and then from that mark I'll come down by ½ inch, and from that point I'll draw a straight line to the side. Now I'm going to use my curved ruler to connect from the top here to where we draw the ½ inch line like this, and from the bottom of the under bust to the ½ inch line as well like this. Since what we are working on is a 3-part corset, we have 2 parts already, so we want to draft out the 3rd part. So on this side I'll come down by 2 inches, and on the middle here I'll come down by 2.5 because it's higher than the side. 2.5 on the middle, then 2 inches on the side, and then I'll connect the points. Now we have our 3-part corset. The next thing to do is to input all the round measurements. Now my bust is already measured, that is 9 inches. So I'll measure what I have here, and then I'll return it. I had 2 inches, so I'm measuring 2 inches now. Then I'll add 1.5 inches seam allowance. I'll come to the waistline as well, and then divide my waist measurement into 4. Then afterwards I'll measure what I have at the dart there. I'll return it, and then I'll add 1.5 inches seam allowance. Now I'll connect the dots together. At the waistline here, if you want your top to be longer than this, go ahead and add whatsoever inches you want to add up. As for me, remember I added 1 inch for the hem allowance because I want this top to be more of crop top. But if you want yours to be longer, you go ahead and add extra inches, or you can add it up when cutting on your fabric. Now the next thing to do is to cut. We are cutting on the line below the chest line, not on the chest line. I'll go ahead now and start cutting. Before I cut on these remaining lines, I want to label my corset part so that I won't mix it up when I'm done cutting. So the upper part is the part label 1, the one facing the center front is the part label 2, and the one facing the side is the part label 3. I also used arrow to indicate the top and the side. Now I can finish up cutting. Now I'll use C-tape to join this part labeled 1 together. I'll join it together and then place it on another paper to cut it out as one. When I'm done cutting, I will label it as 1, and that is all for the front part of this corset pattern. So I'll go ahead now to cut the back pattern. Now this is the paper for our back pattern, and the first thing I'm going to do is to measure 1.5 inches for zipper allowance. Now I'll place this front pattern on it, making sure the center front is at the zipper side, and I'll place the side front as well, leaving the 1 inch gap for the dart, and then I'll pin it round. I will go ahead now to trace out what we have at the side of the front. I will trace the upper part as well, and then remove the front pattern so that I'll work on the back. Now for the back neckline, I'll come down by 1.5 inches and draw a line to the side like this. And then for the dart, I'll measure my bust span, that is my nipple to nipple, which is 3.5, and then I'll make a mark, then measure 1/2 inch on both sides. Then I'll come to the upper part here and measure 3.5 inches as well, and then I'll draw lines to form that. Afterwards, I'll come to the waistline of the zipper, and then I'll measure 1/2 inch outside the zipper line, and then come in by 1/2 inch as well. This is to eliminate bulging of the fabric at the waist side of the zipper. So I'll go ahead now to cut my back pattern. Now if you are making use of loopholes instead of zipper, you don't need to add zipper allowance. I will also cut the 1/2 inch outside the zipper line. Because I want to eliminate this dart, I will cut on one side like this. I'll cut it through and then join it together with the help of C-tape, so that I won't bother myself with taking that on my fabric later on. So when I'm cutting this on my fabric, I'll cut this back pattern as one piece. This is all for drafting out 3-part corset. When cutting on your fabric, please do not forget to add stitching allowance on all the sides of your pattern paper. In my next video, I'll be showing us how to sew 3-part corset. If you are yet to subscribe to my channel, kindly do so and turn on the notification so that whenever I drop new videos, you'll be notified. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next one.